Wednesday. Today we are going to demystify wine labels, and since I'm not a pro yet, I'm going to be basically going off of all the notes that I wrote, so bear with me. So anyways, most wine is marketed under a varietal label, and that varietal label is based on what type of grape variety is used to make the wine, and that is going to be your best indicator as to what style or flavor a certain type of wine has. Now, there actually are requirements to what is and isn't listed on wine labels, and one of those is the vintner's brand and identity, like who made this. And then the other thing is the appellation, which is the origin of the grape, where it was grown, not necessarily where it was bottled or everything else that goes into making wine. And then there are specific wine requirements for the back label. One of that includes the alcohol content and things like that. And for fine wines, it's actually pretty common for them to also include the vintage year, and the vintage year is the year that the grapes were actually harvested. So let's just go through this. And I also, sorry, bad prep, didn't look at these wine bottles specifically, so hopefully they have everything I'm looking for. So we'll start with number one, wine appellation. This is where the grapes are grown. Remember again, not necessarily where the wine was made. And political districts and states qualify as an appellation. For fine wines, they may list things that are from AVAs, and those are American viticulture areas. They're just basically locations that are smaller and more wine specific. So it just kind of lets you know that this wine is assumed to be a little bit more elevated. So for those, okay, this isn't an American wine. That's a problem. But we can still work with this. Okay, so the appellation is generally going to be right under here. In this case, it actually tells you it's the appellation. So just look. Usually there'll be a couple of big logos, and then right here will be the appellation. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. So right there it says appellation. And then the next thing that you can always look for is the brand name. This is mandatory. Most often it's the name of the winery where the wine is sold. And sometimes, I actually think I have an example of this. Sometimes wine will have a multi-wine series names, which means it's sold at a winery, but it's under a semi-independent brand name, like John Legends. So they actually don't have, oh, here we go. Okay, so this is the brand name right here. But on the back, it actually says it's bottled by Raymond Vineyards. So that's an example of the multi-wine series. But either way, look at a bottle. Right here, generally speaking, is going to be your brand name. So your appellation and your brand name are going to be the smaller usually. Sometimes the brand name, like for this right here, that's the brand name as well. So that's usually going to be the one thing that sticks out to you, especially for American wine, because a lot of people buy based on where the wine was made, and that's totally fine. But now you know where to look. Okay, so the grape variety is actually optional. And if they do list the grape variety, there is a requirement that 75% of the wine must be made from that grape that is listed. So this is red. It's made from red grapes. They didn't really do that. So vintage date, once again, it's optional too, and that's the year of the grape harvest. This one, they don't want us to know. This one, they also don't really want us to know. Oh, they put it on the front. Some people put it on the back. So 2015, that's the vintage date. Grapes are harvested, and the grape harvest of 2015. All right, so in the fine print, which is always on the back, they must list the bottle volume, the alcohol content, the country of origin, once again, speaking of the grapes, the company of the facility who made the wine, and its location. So, how much alcohol, where was it made, who made it, where was this at? So, let's look for quality indicators. So, an informal way of letting you know that a bottle is of high quality will be the word reserve. And okay, this bottle does not say reserve, but honestly, it really, really, really should. And then this doesn't say reserve either, but that's a fail. Anyways, it doesn't matter. So general quality indicator is a bottle will say reserve if they're just, casually better than most. And then if it's a regulated quality indicator, that means there are stipulations they must go through, things they must meet, tests they must pass in order to be considered quality, then it will say estate bottled. Those are basically just two general designations of superiority. So then, single vineyard designation. This names the site where the grape is grown, and it signals that a wine has a higher quality potential. And that's just because if they're listing the vineyard, that means that they have stricter standards that they have to meet. So for this one, they actually did list the vineyard. It's a French wine, sorry. Remember, I screwed up. So they list the vineyard right here, and that lets you know that this actually has standards that it must meet. So you're usually pretty safe if, you pay attention to the vintage date that they listed, to the grapes that they use, and things like that. Now, one last thing, style references. This, I don't. So this one doesn't really have any style references. However, if there is a style reference, it's generally going to be down here. Oh, look, I found the vintage date, 2014. Anyways, it'll be down here by the vintage date, and it'll say things like sparkling, rosé, unoaked, late harvest, and that's just another hint of what the flavor and style is. So, yeah, hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I realize this video was kind of a mess. Don't criticize too harshly. I'm still new at this. But I think you probably got a little something out of that. Let me know if you have questions. And as always, Happy Wine Wednesday!